Delilah Hart dropped the tray of hot cocoa when the front doors of Pine Ridge Lodge flew open with a gust of wind, and a man in a soaked designer coat stepped through like he'd walked out of a movie, and not the kind that ended quietly. "Sorry, sorry," she muttered, crouching to clean the mess as the warm scent of chocolate spread across the stone floor. The man didn't seem to notice the spill or the cold. He stood tall and still, his gaze fixed directly on her. "Are you all right?" Delilah looked up, startled by the deep, steady voice. His eyes were a sharp steel blue, his hair dark and wet from the snow, and he had the kind of presence that made you forget how to breathe for half a second. "Yeah," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. "Welcome to Pine Ridge. Sorry about the mess. Rough drive?" He gave a tight nod, glancing behind him at the sleek black SUV being parked by the valet. "It was longer than expected. I'm checking in. Name's Callum West." Delilah blinked. That name sounded familiar. She'd seen it on the reservation list earlier. He'd booked the honeysuckle suite for a full month. Most guests came for a weekend, a week at most. A whole month, that was. Rare, right, Mr. West, I'll grab your keycard. He didn't move, just watched her like he was trying to figure her out. And it wasn't creepy, it was curious. Like he didn't expect someone like her to be working the front desk of a mountain lodge. Delilah handled the check-in, ignoring the strange flutter in her chest. She was used to guests, wealthy ones too. Pine Ridge wasn't a cheap place. But something about him made her nervous in a way that had nothing to do with professionalism. "Your suite's at the end of the east wing," she said, handing him the card. "It has a private fireplace, soaking tub, and the best view of the lake. Breakfast is at 8, but we can bring it to your room if you like." Callum tilted his head. "Do you do room service?" She laughed. "Only if you're lucky." "I'll take my chances," he said, then turned and disappeared down the hallway. Delilah stood frozen for 10 seconds before realizing she was still holding the tray. The next morning, Delilah was wiping down the bar in the lodge's small cafe when Callum walked in wearing a black turtleneck and dark jeans that looked way too expensive for the mountains. He took the stool right in front of her. "You weren't kidding about the view," he said casually. "But I think the coffee's better." She raised a brow, pouring him a cup. "You've only been here 12 hours, and yet I'm already an expert." Delilah rolled her eyes, hiding a grin. She'd learned quickly that Callum West was sharp, observant, and had an annoying way of always looking calm, like nothing could touch him. Still, he kept showing up every morning, every evening, always at the cafe, always sitting in front of her. "You're not like the other guests," she said one night, handing him a hot cider. He looked up from his book. "How so? You don't ski, you don't hike, you don't do spa appointments, you just sit here with your overpriced watch and read." He glanced at his wrist like he'd forgotten what he was wearing. "I came to disappear." Delilah leaned her elbows on the counter. "From what?" He didn't answer. Just met her eyes and said, "You ask a lot of questions." "It's part of the job." "No, it's not. You're curious." She flushed, but didn't deny it. "You've got that look. Like you're important somewhere else but pretending you're not." Callum smiled, the first real one she'd seen from him. "You're not wrong." By the second week, he was helping her restock the cafe after hours, claiming he was bored, though she knew he wasn't. He was the kind of man who didn't need to do anything to feel in control, but he still showed up quietly, consistently. One night, as they sat near the fireplace in the lodge's lounge with mugs of tea, he asked, "Why are you here?" Delilah shrugged. "My parents used to bring me up here when I was a kid. It was the only place we ever went. After they passed, I needed something familiar. So I stayed." He nodded slowly. "You like simple." She gave him a look. "That's not a bad thing." "I didn't say it was, I don't think I've ever had that." Delilah tilted her head. "You talk like someone who spent his whole life running." He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Maybe I have." It wasn't until the third week that everything shifted. There was a storm coming in. The lodge emptied quickly. Guests didn't like being snowed in, but Callum stayed. Of course he did. That night she found him staring out at the falling snow from the lounge's bay window. Everyone left, she said, joining him. Not everyone. They stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the wind outside. I Googled you, she said suddenly. Callum turned, a shadow of amusement in his eyes. Took you long enough. You're a millionaire, she said, almost like it was a crime. Technically, yes. What are you doing here then? Hiding from a hostile boardroom takeover, he laughed, low and real. Not quite. I sold my company 6 months ago, left everything to the partners. I needed out. Why? He looked at her, then really looked. Because I had everything and still felt nothing. Delilah's heart skipped. He stepped closer. Until I came here. She didn't move, didn't even breathe. I didn't expect you, he said, voice low. But you make everything quiet, she blinked. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Callum reached for her hand, held it like it was something precious. You make me want to stay, her heart pounded. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said, brushing her cheek with his thumb. I know I haven't smiled like this in years. I know I sleep better when I know you're in the same building. I know I've been counting the hours until I see your face. Callum, he leaned in. Tell me to stop and I will. She didn't. Instead, she kissed him first, and the storm outside raged on as if answering the one inside her chest. The morning after the kiss, Delilah stepped into the staff kitchen early, her heart still tangled in the memory of how Callum had held her like he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. She moved through her routine, numbly grinding coffee beans, slicing fresh bread, arranging the breakfast trays while her thoughts were anything but quiet. Outside, the storm had left a thick blanket of snow over the lodge grounds, turning the landscape into an untouched world of white. Most of the guests had left, and only a skeleton crew remained. It was the kind of silence Delilah usually craved, but now it felt charged, like the calm that came just before something shifted forever. At exactly 8, Callum appeared. Not at the cafe, but at the back hallway where only staff usually went. His coat was unzipped, his hair still damp from a shower, and his gaze locked onto hers like he'd been looking for her since the moment he woke. I couldn't wait, he said simply. Delilah glanced around. You're not supposed to be back here. I figured you'd say that, he said, stepping fully into the kitchen, but I also figured you wouldn't send me away. She didn't. Instead, she handed him a mug of black coffee and leaned her hip against the prep table. Last night, she began, but Callum cut in gently. I know, it changes things. Delilah searched his face. You sure you're not just caught up in the snow and the quiet and the idea of me? His expression didn't shift. I've been around too long to mistake comfort for something real. And you're not an idea, Delilah. You're the first real thing I've felt in a long time. She looked down at the floor, suddenly unsure. I don't do temporary. I've seen people pass through this place like ghosts. I don't want to be someone you remember fondly when you go back to whatever city you came from. I'm not going back, he said, her eyes lifted sharply to his. What do you mean? Callum took a breath, then set his coffee down. I bought the land around the North Ridge. About 30 acres behind the lake trail. Delilah stared. What? I closed on it last week. I've been working on the deal since before I got here, he said. Originally, I thought I'd build a vacation retreat, something exclusive, high-end, but after meeting you, I started thinking about something different. She didn't speak, couldn't. I want to build something that matters, he said. Not just to me, to this place, to the people who live here year-round. I have the capital. What I need is someone who understands the heart of this place. Someone like you. Delilah took a step back, confused and overwhelmed. You barely know me. I know enough, he said calmly. You're rooted here, you care, you see people. That's rarer than you think. You're talking about building something together and we haven't even had dinner, Callum chuckled. Then have dinner with me, tonight, no suits, no snowstorms, just you and me. Delilah hesitated. That's not going to fix what's going on in my head. I don't want to fix it, he said. I want to understand it. She looked at him for a long time, then finally nodded once. Fine, dinner. That evening, he didn't meet her in the cafe. Instead, he sent a note through one of the staff with a message written in clean, confident script. Dress warm. Bring your boots. Delilah bundled up and followed the directions out past the lodge entrance, where the path curved around the frozen lake. The snow had stopped, but the air was sharp with cold. She walked until she saw a glow ahead. Callum had set up a canvas tent with string lights woven through the trees above it. Inside, a small table was laid with real silverware, cloth napkins, and a hot plate of roasted vegetables and seared fish. He stood near a portable heater, holding a thermos in one hand. He offered it to her with a glint of something unspoken in his eyes. Mulled wine. I had the chef smuggle it out. Delilah took the cup, both surprised and moved. You did all this? I told you I don't do halfway. They sat across from each other, the snow crunching softly outside the tent. As she ate, she couldn't help but watch him, his ease, his confidence, the way he listened as if there was nothing more important in the world than what she might say next. Why here? She finally asked. Why not some island or a penthouse in Paris? He looked past her to the trees beyond. Because I was tired of rooms that echo. This place doesn't feel empty, it feels honest. Delilah leaned back. You sound like someone who's been disappointed a lot. I have, he admitted. I built an empire trying to prove I could. But once I had it, I realized I'd lost any sense of why I wanted it in the first place. And now, his gaze returned to hers. Now I want to build something that doesn't vanish when the deal closes. Something that feels like home. She wasn't sure how long they sat there, talking long after the plates had been cleared. The fire crackled and the wine made her cheeks warm, but it wasn't the drink that had her heart racing. You're not what I expected, she said softly. He smiled, not arrogantly, but with a quiet kind of hope. And you're the only thing I didn't plan for. Later, as he walked her back beneath the starlit trees, he didn't reach for her hand. He didn't need to. The space between them was full of something new, something neither of them could name yet. But both of them felt. And Delilah knew, somewhere deep inside, that the life she'd settled into without question was about to change. Not because he'd offered her a chance to be part of something bigger, but because for the first time in years, she wanted more. 2 days after the dinner in the snow-lit tent, Delilah stood in the lobby's storage room, arms buried elbow-deep in a box of mismatched flannel blankets, trying to ignore the knot that had taken up residence in her stomach. It wasn't nerves, not exactly. It was pressure, the mounting awareness that every hour she spent with Callum West shifted her world. The man was magnetic, yes, but now he was making plans. Big ones. Ones that had her name tangled up in them, and she hadn't dared ask herself what it meant until now. Did you know the power lines past the ridge are buried? Callum's voice cut through the silence behind her. She turned, startled. What? He leaned against the doorframe, snow dusting the shoulders of his charcoal peacoat. I had the property surveyed. The utility access is better than expected. It changes what we can build. Delilah blinked. Shouldn't you be telling that to an architect? I will, but you're the one I want to tell first. She closed the box and brushed her hands on her jeans. You're acting like I already said yes. I'm acting like I want you to, he replied. That's not the same. His tone was calm, but she caught the undercurrent. He wasn't used to waiting. She doubted anyone told him no very often. I haven't even seen the land, she said. Then come with me, he offered. Tomorrow I'll show you. Delilah hesitated. She should have said she had shifts, tasks, guests, but none of those excuses made it past her lips. Fine, she said, but I'm not promising anything. You never do, he said, turning back down the hall. That's what makes it interesting. The next morning, she met him at the edge of the property line, where the trail disappeared into snow-covered woods. He was already there, holding 2 thermoses and a folded trail map. They hiked in silence at first, the path narrowing as the trees closed around them. She noticed how he adjusted his pace to match hers, never rushing, never leading too far ahead. Eventually, the trees opened to a clearing where the snow hadn't yet been disturbed. Beyond it, the lake curved around a slope of untouched forest, and the sun was just beginning to cast golden streaks across the frozen surface. Callum stopped beside her. This is the heart of it. This is where it starts. She stared at the space, trying to imagine walls, windows, people. You really see it already, he nodded. Not every detail, but the feeling? Yeah, I see that, Delilah glanced at him. And what if I don't feel the same? Then I won't build it, he said simply. She laughed once, disbelieving. You'd scrap the entire thing, he didn't look away. If it doesn't feel right to you, then it isn't. The honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. It was terrifying how much weight he gave her opinion. Callum, she said slowly, I've stayed in one place my whole life because it's the only thing I could hold on to. You drop into people's lives and change everything without asking if they want it. He considered that for a beat. You're right. I'm used to moving fast, but I'm not trying to change you, Delilah. I'm trying to make room for you in something I want to build. She turned back to the view, snow glittering in the morning light. I don't know what I want yet. I can handle that, he said. As long as you don't walk away. She didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Later that evening, Delilah found herself standing in the kitchen with her cousin Harper, who dropped in for the weekend from a nearby town to help during the slow season. So, let me get this straight, Harper said, stuffing cookie dough into a tin. You kissed a millionaire who's now casually asking you to help him build a mountain hideaway, Delilah sighed. It wasn't casual, you should be doing cartwheels. I'm not sure what I'm doing. He's intense, Harper. He makes everything feel bigger. Harper raised an eyebrow. And that's a bad thing. It's a terrifying thing. Just then, the lodge phone rang. Delilah answered. Her expression shifted as she listened. When she hung up, Harper asked, Everything okay? That was the front gate. Someone showed up asking for Callum. Harper blinked. Like a friend? No, a woman. She said she's his fiancée. Delilah didn't even realize she dropped the tin she was holding until it hit the floor with a heavy thud. She left Harper to clean up and made her way toward the east wing, her pulse thudding in her ears. She didn't knock. She just opened his suite door. Callum was at the fireplace, shirt sleeves rolled, flipping through papers. He looked up instantly. You okay? There's someone at the gate, she said, voice flat. She says she's engaged to you, he froze. Then he swore under his breath and tossed the papers onto the table. She's not. Well, she thinks she is. He stepped toward her. Her name's Alina. We were together 4 years ago. It ended badly. She didn't take it well. Delilah crossed her arms. And now she's here. I haven't seen her since I walked out of our engagement party and never spoke to her again. Delilah stared at him. You left her at your own engagement party. I knew marrying her would destroy me, he said. She loved the lifestyle, the image. She never saw me. Not really. Delilah didn't know what to say to that. Callum ran a hand through his hair. She must have found out I was here. Maybe the land deal leaked. I don't know. But if she came thinking she can pick up where we left off, she's wrong. Delilah swallowed. So tell her that. I will, he said. I just need you to believe me first. I don't know if I do. He didn't try to convince her. He just said, then give me a chance to prove it. She turned and walked out without another word. That night she didn't sleep. The image of Callum standing in the firelight with regret written across his face haunted her. But so did the thought of what it might mean if he was telling the truth. Delilah didn't see Callum at breakfast. She didn't expect to, but it still felt strange, the quiet where he used to be. The fireplace lounge was empty. The cafe stool he usually claimed sat untouched. The lodge felt colder, like some vital heat had gone out of it overnight. By noon, Harper had returned to town, promising to call if anything changed. Delilah barely heard her leave. She spent most of the day restocking wood piles, cleaning out the pantry, and avoiding the east wing entirely. That was until Fiona, the housekeeper who'd been at Pine Ridge for nearly 2 decades, found her near the laundry room and said, He left something at the front desk. Said it was for you. Delilah hesitated before taking the envelope Fiona handed her. It was heavy cream paper unsealed. Inside was a single sheet with her name written at the top in looping, deliberate ink. No long explanation, no apology, just an address and a time, 4 o'clock. She almost crumpled it, almost threw it in the trash and walked away from the entire confusing whirlwind he'd brought with him. But something in her refused to let go that easily. At 3:45, she stepped into her boots, wrapped her scarf tight, and walked out in the direction of the lake trail. The address wasn't far. Just past a bend she hadn't explored since childhood, where old cabins once stood, long abandoned and half reclaimed by the forest. But when she turned the last corner, she stopped short. There, tucked against the tree line, was a new structure. It wasn't finished, raw beams still exposed, the porch unpainted, but it stood proud and solid, facing the lake with a wide front deck and massive windows that reflected the snow-covered world beyond. Callum was waiting on the steps, jacket open despite the chill. "You built this?" she asked, her voice tighter than she intended. "I'm building it," he corrected. "Started the day after I arrived. I wasn't sure what it would be then, but I know now." She folded her arms. "And what's that? Your next winter escape?" He shook his head. "My future." Delilah stared at him, stunned into silence. "I needed to show you this," he said, "because talking wasn't enough, because just saying I'm not running anymore doesn't mean anything unless I prove it." She stepped forward slowly. "That woman Elena, what did you say to her?" "I told her the truth," he said. "That I left because I couldn't marry someone who wanted my money more than my soul. That coming here wasn't about escaping, it was about finding something real, and that I already had." Delilah's throat tightened. "And she just left. She tried to convince me otherwise," he said, "but I didn't waver, not once." She looked at the cabin again. "It's beautiful." "I want you to help me finish it," he said. "Not just the walls, the life inside it." Delilah's breath caught. "You can't ask me that without giving me time." "I'm not asking you to move in tomorrow," he said. "I'm asking you to believe this is real, that I didn't come here looking for anything but I found you, and I can't imagine walking away." She met his eyes. "I don't want to leave either. But I've never done this before. I don't know how to trust something that feels too big, too fast." "You don't have to know how," he said. "Just say you want to try." Delilah took another step, snow crunching beneath her. She let out a slow breath, the cold stinging her lungs as she looked at the glass windows, the bare wood, the untouched promise of it all. "I want to try," she said finally, "but I'm not changing who I am. I'm not giving up this place." "I would never ask you to," he said. "This place made you. And I want to build a life that honors that." She swallowed hard. "Then you better learn how to stack firewood properly, because you're going to need it out here." He laughed, the sound raw and genuine, then he stepped down, closing the distance between them with deliberate steps. When he reached her, he didn't rush. He just reached for her hands, curling his fingers through hers. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "Not without you." This time, when their lips met, it wasn't rushed or stolen, it was chosen a promise. Later that evening, the staff gathered in the cafe for an impromptu dinner. Fiona brought out the good wine, and Mason from maintenance grilled steaks on the back porch despite the snow. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and full of laughter. Callum stayed close to Delilah, not in the possessive way of a man trying to make a point, but in the steady way of someone who finally knew where he belonged. When the power flickered just once, just briefly, he moved without hesitation to check the generator, returning with a sheepish grin and a dusting of snow in his hair. "You're really going to do it," Delilah said, watching him from the steps. He leaned close. "I already did. I never thought my life would change," she said. "Not like this." Callum looked around the room where old friends and new faces shared food and stories. "Sometimes the best things happen when you stop expecting them," he said. She turned to him. "This place was always my whole world. And now," he asked. She smiled. "Now it feels like a beginning." They didn't need anything more than that. No ring, no fanfare, no grand announcement. Just the quiet certainty of two people who had found each other in the most unexpected place. At the exact moment they were both ready to stop running. The next morning, the sun rose over Pine Ridge in a blaze of gold, casting long shadows over freshly fallen snow. And for the first time in years, Delilah didn't feel like she was waiting for something to change, because it already had, and everything she'd ever wanted was standing beside her. Callum stood with his sleeves rolled and a pencil behind his ear. staring at the unfinished cabin wall like it had personally offended him. A faint layer of sawdust clung to his shoulders, and he looked more like a man who'd spent his life framing houses than one who used to negotiate multi-million-dollar mergers in glass towers. Delilah leaned against the porch post, arms crossed, watching him with a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration. "You know," she said, "most people would have hired a crew for this instead of learning how to use a circular saw from YouTube videos." He turned and tapped the stud with the pencil. "Most people didn't promise someone they'd build something with their own hands." She stepped forward, brushing a fleck of wood from his cheek. "You're going to be sore for a week." "I already am," he muttered. "Then maybe take a break before your back locks up." "I will." Just as soon as this last beam's in, Delilah placed a hand on his arm. "It's not a race." Callum looked at her and his expression softened. "It feels like the first thing I've done that matters," she nodded, understanding even if she didn't say it aloud. Every nail driven into this frame was part of a promise neither of them had known how to speak at first. But now, it was there in every quiet decision. In the way he listened to her suggestions. In the way she showed up every morning without needing to be asked. Later that day, as the sun dipped low, they sat on the porch steps of the half-finished cabin, sipping apple cider as the lake reflected soft pinks and golds. Without looking at her, Callum asked, "Have you ever thought about doing something more with Pine Ridge?" Delilah furrowed her brow. "Like what?" "Expanding it, not bigger, just broader. A few small cabins, more community involvement, maybe a seasonal market, a scholarship fund in your parents' name." She blinked, caught off guard. "You've really thought about that?" "I've started drawing it up," he said. "Not for profit. Just for legacy, something that lasts." Delilah looked out at the trees, the snow melting in slow patches, revealing pine needles and the first hints of spring underneath. "I didn't know anyone else saw this place the way I do," she said. "I didn't until I saw it through you." She exhaled slowly. "I don't want to lose what makes this place feel small. Safe." "You won't," he said. "We'll protect that, together." Delilah turned toward him, studying his face in the fading light. "You really would stay, wouldn't you?" "I already have," he said. "My company's gone, my apartment's been sold. Everything I had before this was just decoration. None of it felt like home." Her voice was quiet. "And this does." "You do." They didn't need to say anything else after that. They sat in silence until the sky turned navy and the stars blinked into existence overhead. 2 weeks later, the cabin was finished. Not by a team of contractors, but by Callum, with Delilah beside him every step of the way. It wasn't flawless. One of the kitchen tiles was slightly crooked and the front door stuck if you closed it too hard, but it was theirs. The night they lit the fireplace for the first time, he handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a silver key. "You're not asking me to move in, are you?" she asked, already smiling. "No," he said. "I'm asking you to decide when you're ready, but I wanted you to have it. Just in case." She slid the key into her pocket. "Someday. I can wait," he said. But he didn't have to wait long. By the time the next snow fell, Delilah had moved in first unofficially, then completely, bringing her favorite worn armchair and her collection of second-hand books. They painted the bedroom a warm sage green, hung her parents' photo near the window, and named the cabin Alder House after the trees that lined the ridge behind it. The expansion at Pine Ridge began quietly, with a single new cabin tucked into the woods, designed by Delilah and built under Callum's watchful eye. The scholarship fund launched with the help of the town's school board, and the seasonal market brought in artisans from neighboring counties. People started to notice the changes, not because the lodge got bigger, but because it got better, more thoughtful, more rooted. On the 1-year anniversary of the day he first stepped through the lodge doors soaked in snow and attitude, Callum took Delilah on a walk around the lake. She didn't ask where they were going. She knew that look in his eyes, the quiet determination, the kind of certainty that didn't need to explain itself. They stopped at the clearing where they'd first stood, where it had all started. Callum turned to her and reached into his coat pocket. It wasn't a diamond the size of a walnut or something pulled from a velvet box. It was a simple gold band, warm and understated, engraved with the words, "I stayed, for you." Delilah's breath caught. He didn't drop to one knee. He just held her hands and said, "You changed everything I thought I knew about love. You made me want to build something that would last. I can't imagine the rest of my life without you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded. "Yes. Of course I will." They didn't host a massive wedding or fly off for a honeymoon in the Maldives. Instead, they were married under the pines behind Alder House, with Fiona officiating and Mason stringing up lights he'd borrowed from the annual winter formal. Harper brought a cake with too much frosting, and the town's local bluegrass band played long into the night. They danced under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms, and when the first snowflake drifted down, Delilah laughed and kissed her husband in the glow of the cabin's front porch. They built a life that was quiet but never small. A life filled with crackling fires, muddy boots, and plans drawn on napkins over morning coffee, and every evening they returned to each other, not because they had to, but because they couldn't imagine being anywhere else.